Welcome to The Truth. Today we are going to unmask the deep state, and here to help us do it, I'm happy to welcome Vem Miller to The Truth. Vem, welcome.
How you doing? How you doing? Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Vem. He is a music producer, a film producer, and he is a political activist. And Vem has become hyper aware of activities from the deep state, which is a subject that listeners to The Truth have heard us talk about a lot of late. So Vem, let's get right to it. How did you become aware of the deep state and when?
Funny enough, the first time I ever heard about the deep state, which I think indicates where our politics has gone, is through hardcore Democrats. In 1992, I think it was, a friend of mine that was later on became a famous singer of a rock band in Los Angeles showed me these books on how there was a deep state, how the intelligence operations or intelligence community was part of that deep state and what they were doing, and started exposing things like chemtrails. I mean, we're talking 30-something years ago, And the irony of all of this to me is like where our politics has gone, because this used to be a big topic amongst Democrats. The idea that there is a deep state, they're poisoning us, and they want us to go to war. And when I came of age, that was my first entry into politics, was realizing that George W. Bush was a really not a good person, was lying to, was getting us into all these unnecessary wars and infringing upon our rights via Patriot Act. And that was really my entry, as I thought the Republicans were the bad guys. And then lo and behold, I discovered, no, it's a uniparty. They're part of a deep state. They're all part of the same thing. Because I thought, hey, Barack Obama came, he's talking all this peace and love stuff. He's going to go after the military-industrial complex. Well, lo and behold, he was part of the military-industrial complex, part of the same program. And then we have Trump, who was genuinely wanted peace, And so I started to see the distinction there between Republican Democrats and realizing that it's just wings of the same corrupt bird. And really the outlier here is Donald Trump, and hence why we seem to be leaning more towards him to be president.
So how has that helped or hindered or hurt your standing in Hollywood if you are now a Trump sympathizer, much less a loyalist, it sounds like?
In Hollywood, in 2015, before I had my enlightening experiences in terms of what was really going on, for a moment of time, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, believe it or not, and I didn't understand the implications of that. So apologies, viewers. I would never ever consider throwing a dime at Bernie Sanders. But when it was a Hillary versus Bernie contrast, I was definitely much more into Hillary into Bernie at the time. And for doing that, I was attacked, I was shunned, and we're talking about not Trump, we're talking about Bernie, right? So I started to realize, wow, there's a fanatical element here in Hollywood, because, I'm just saying the other guy, because I never got good, and I didn't know the things that I know now about Hillary. So I just felt like, oh, Hillary's kind of creepy. I don't like her. I like this Bernie guy. Seems like a much better person, at the time. And for that, I was looked at as like I must be crazy. And so then it came to a point where you just lose like fear at one point. I think there's people react in two different ways. There's a kind of person that'll go into their hole and literally live a fictitious existence in order to make others happy, in order to make the community and the peers happy. I took a very different approach, because once I started realizing, and this is again 2015, 2016, once I started realizing what they were doing with Donald Trump, with the fiction that they were putting out there, with the reality TV show editing tricks that they were doing to create false realities, then I started to become much more of a Donald Trump fan, because it became very apparent that they were trying so hard to put fiction out there. I was like, wait a minute, you guys are like lying. And so I started realizing that there's literally an industry of propaganda there, and around 2016 is when I kind of had it enough. And I just came out of, so to speak, I came out of the closet and lost, 1,000-something Facebook friends, and had people calling me a white supremacist and all kinds of names. But you just stop caring after a while, you know what I mean? And I think that, when we're talking about castrating children, when we're talking about giving jabs that kill people, I mean, it just, at a point, it becomes like, which side are you on? We're going to be part of that evil. And that's just something that I was not cool with. And I decided, you know what, I'd rather sacrifice my 6-figure Hollywood career and retain my soul as opposed to be part of this evil propaganda machine.
Well, you've just become my best friend. I mean, I think if people, well, you're enlightened. And I think the largest problem that we have in our country today, or so many people, are not really informed. And they get their news from the mainstream media because they always have. They vote Democratic because they always have. And of course, I'm speaking about blacks and Jews in particular, because I don't know how Joe Biden says if you weren't voting for him, you weren't black. I don't know how a black person in America today could not vote for Donald Trump. He did more to help the black community in terms of bringing them up, employment, giving them, Kamala Harris talks about opportunity. Donald Trump created jobs and gave them opportunity. But he also did more for reforming criminal justice in 4 years than Barack Obama did in 8. In fact, Barack Obama didn't really seem that interested in criminal justice reform. Donald Trump said he was going to do it, and he did. And I think he'll do a lot more starting in January the 20th, 2025, if we get across the line. But I think you've nailed it. What I don't understand, I mean, Bernie Sanders, really, he's to the left of Hillary, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, totally. And I didn't, these are things I didn't understand. I mean, I'm semi-embarrassed, but I say these stories because, people accuse people like myself of being, a certain kind of shade of, oh, you're obviously raised racist and blah, blah, blah. And it's just the logic of it is so illogical, right? That no, in 1992, I learned about deep state through Democrats. I was a hardcore Democrat, a JFK Democrat, and that was the distinction for me, right? When I realized that the JFK Democrats were like a thing of the past, that these Democrats are resembling nothing like JFK Democrats. My attraction to Bernie Sanders was believing he was a JFK Democrat. But when I realized the man's a communist, obviously, definitely not attracted to communism since my entire family escaped that and came here. And, so I was fooled because that's what the mainstream media does. But having been behind the scenes,
it's brainwashing. I mean, that's what they've done to us, that they've brainwashed us, and they've told us that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and that if you don't believe that, you're a conspiratorialist, so they don't ask any questions. And the American public have fallen for it because it's convenient. But I think that when you zoom out, that people vote for 4 main reasons. And it may be an oversimplification, but I put it in the category of ideology, policy, character, and personality. And all too often, personality takes on the bigger criteria in people's decision making because it's easy. I like the guy. No, I don't like the guy. That determines who you're going to vote for, really? Well, that's the problem that Donald Trump has in his public persona. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him, and his private persona is somebody I really enjoy. He is smart, he is funny, and he is principled. And
he's the man. He's the man that's an alpha that they hate. This is about attacks on the alpha male. The image that Donald Trump presents. Okay, if you look at the world history, right? You have individuals like Ataturk in Turkey. Okay, and Ataturk in Turkey, and I'm not suggesting that we should have an Ataturk in this country because Ataturk was a dictator. Okay, but the presence of Ataturk, his courage at that time in history, and again, I'm opposed to Ataturk and everything he stood for. But because of his presence, his alpha male characteristics, his leadership, he's influenced Turkey for over 100 years. Every building you walk into, there's a picture of Ataturk. And again, I don't condone that because that's dictator type stuff. But that is an influence that somebody that had a powerful persona had in a country that's lasted over a century. Okay, this is what they're so scared of Donald Trump, because you have a contrast there. You have this weak, frail male, which, by the way, the third wave feminists love because he's a complete tool. And I'm referring to Biden, like literally a puppet, hand puppet for them, for the third wave feminists. And then you have Donald Trump that couldn't give a rat's ass about that sort of thing. That is the biggest threat to them, because if this man wins, it's about his aura, his personality. Now you have generations of men wanting to be Trump-like. What does that do to the deep state? So that's what they're scared of, because they want the image of America's leader to be feeble, to be a pushover. And that's what they love. That's what they love so much about Biden and the other hand puppet, Kamala, another hand puppet, Biden. And frankly, I think George W. Bush was another hand puppet. So, yeah. And Bill Clinton as well. And George H.W. Bush. I think the last not hand puppet president we had was Ronald Reagan prior to Trump.
Well, and they tried to take him out, according to some people. I don't know
Yeah.
whether John Hinckley was acting on his own volition or whether he had been groomed for what he did. And I really don't have information about that. I just don't.
We did a Roger Stone interview that's fantastic about the JFK assassination. He's writing a new book that he gave us a sneak peek to about his second gunman during that time, because the gunshots actually came from a different direction and there was witnesses. So there's a lot of interesting things about the Reagan assassination of 1981 as well that's about to come out.
And we can see that where? Is that on the America Happens Network, or is that part of your Blood Money podcast?
Well, the JFK assassination documentary, which is at the top of our website, I highly recommend that people go check out our featured section. The short JFK documentary with Roger Stone actually touches upon this topic, but he exposed to us during that documentary that he's working on a book. He gave us some of the details. It's not out yet, but one of the primary details is that even in that incident, the trajectory of the gunshots didn't make sense because they came from a different direction, and they had actually seen, witnesses had actually seen, I believe it was a patio in a hotel, they had seen somebody with a gun up there that was never investigated.
And you're speaking about Reagan's, the attempt on Reagan's life?
Yeah, 1981. The Hinckley, the point being that Roger Stone saying that Hinckley was not, he was the patsy of that. Like, anybody that knows about the RFK assassination, you had Sirhan, who wasn't the guy that fired the kill shots. There was 11 shots. And that's what they do a lot of the time, where that's the diversions created. And the point being that Hinckley was the diversion, and the real gunman during that diversion is the one that killed him, which is exactly what happened with the RFK assassination.
I don't know as much about RFK's assassination as I would like to, but I've obviously read everything that you just said. On JFK's assassination, I have spent a lifetime studying it. There is very little you can ask or talk about on JFK's assassination that I don't know about. And I'm not being proudful or boastful. It's just that I developed an obsession about JFK's assassination because I was 10 years old. I was home from school with the flu, and I watched it all unfold in real time with my mom and dad sitting around our black and white television for 4 days. And so it is seared into my brain. And I was willing as a kid to accept the Warren Commission report. I believed in America. I believed in our government. I had faith in our government. Little did I know until I got to college and heard a book review on A Rush to Judgment by Mark Lane, that there were more questions than answers, and the Warren report was a fiction. And here's the thing that really boggles the mind. There is no living person who has bothered to spend an hour, maybe 2 hours, who thinks that Lee Harvey Oswald even pulled the trigger. Let alone acted alone. We know that the deep state, i.e. Allen Dulles, killed Kennedy. Johnson and Hoover covered it up. Did they help orchestrate it? I don't know. But you know that Dulles hated Kennedy. Kennedy said he was going to chop the CIA into a million pieces and spread the parts from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And so it was really a function of, do we get him before he gets us? And we know how it played out. I think we lost our innocence on November 22nd, 1963. I think we're still paying for it. But the biggest problem, they got away with it. And there's no accountability. And now they have been emboldened, and the intelligence community has unlimited funding with no oversight and zero accountability. I suspect, without proof, that the CIA, the deep state, I think the members of Congress fall in 3 categories: untouched and untouchable. And I think it's count them on maybe one hand, maybe 2. Yeah. Bought off or blackmailed. They got the goods on them. Well, what do you think?
I agree with everything you just said. I mean, I worked in the, I had the fortune of actually working in a lot of these different industries. I actually worked with Diddy personally because I was a music video director. I was a hot music video director for about 8 years. So I saw that part of the world. I've been very much I would call myself an outlier insider, if that makes sense, because I was always an insider in Hollywood, but I was also the outlier because I didn't go along with groups and thoughts. I've just just never been the type that's going to be like, oh, let me join your little secret society here or whatever, and let's do a bunch of evil, bad things. I was never a part of that, you know? I relied on the talent alone, but I saw what was happening. And so there's not many people that could tell me that this stuff's fiction when I've actually been to Diddy white parties and stuff. And by the way, Diddy, the white parties versus those freak offs, very different thing. The white parties were kind of G-rated, at least they were on the main floor. I heard there was rooms where there was a lot of shady things going on, but the main floor, you know, was just a gathering of people, right? But I saw how it works. I heard a lot of murmurs. I know that P. Diddy was untouchable. He ripped me off of a lot of money because I was directing a music video for him and I never got paid for it. And I also heard stories about how songs were stolen, albums were stolen, disgruntled artists he worked with that never got paid. But also hearing that, hey, he's untouchable, and understanding that he has protection somewhere, right? We thought that was mafia protection, but it seems as though it's really the feds that are protecting him because he has dirt on a lot of people. So I 100% believe that's part of how they operate, how they blackmail people. And I truly believe that most members of Congress, in fact, the media as well, everybody's got dirt on them. And by the way, one little story I want to tell you. This is actually an interesting story because every time I would sign, so I was a pretty prolific creator of content because I could actually start content from zero and get to a point where I've sold a TV show. Usually that takes more like teams of people. So I started to get a lot of buzz about, you know, the work that I was doing and that sort of thing. What I noticed is that there's a distinction in Hollywood between if you're somebody that is not necessarily needing the help of others, you're usually not going through some of these blackmails, some of these illicit moments where, you know, what I'm trying to get at is actors, producers that are not producing their own content. They're more, due to their need of these power players, they're more vulnerable, right? That stuff didn't touch me, but I actually saw it very clearly with other individuals that they were kind of on strings, you know, more or less.
Well, I want to talk about the music industry. I had it planned for the later in the segment. We can move to it now if you'd like, but
Yeah, sure.
let's push it back for a bit. But I do want to talk about the similarities between Epstein and P. Diddy. Their methods seem to be very similar. I don't have any evidence on P. Diddy being an asset of the CIA. We do have evidence that he was a snitch to the FBI and has been for decades, really. But Epstein, you know, the U.S. attorney, let me see if I can remember exactly how it went. And it was U.S. attorney, I don't think it was U.S. attorney, I think it was the state attorney for Palm Beach County, where Epstein was prosecuted for child trafficking, basically, and sexual assault on a minor. The charges were basically swept under the rug. He got very lenient treatment. And when that individual who prosecuted him had a Senate confirmation hearing in Washington for a job, I'm not sure whose administration it was in. It may have been Bush. But basically, I think maybe Obama. Somebody asked him, well, what are you going to do when they ask you about your leniency towards Epstein? He said, well, I was informed by the CIA that we weren't supposed to touch him, that he was an asset. So that's evidence that we have that Epstein was an asset for the CIA, and I don't pretend to know how or what. But he certainly got leniency in committing heinous acts against people that were minors. That usually gets you pretty severe treatment. And so he had video cameras allegedly in bedrooms, and we know that he had close relationships with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates, and God only knows who else. They have been unable to have any linkage between him and Trump as hard as they've tried, other than Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago and Trump kicked him out because he felt he was a sketchy individual. But P. Diddy had cameras in all of his bedrooms. He's gotten away with his deeds for a long time. It sounds like the house of cards are coming crashing down around him. So did he make somebody mad? Did he make the wrong people mad, and now they coming down on him?
There's one thing I wanted to mention before I answer that question. Every time I signed to a deal with a production company, and I realized this when I was a TV show director and producer, showrunner, all of a sudden I get invited to a party. There'd be offers of bringing prostitutes. There'd be offers of bringing drugs, right? And I noticed that this was kind of like, oh, welcome to this production. We're about to do a TV show together. Or we're about to do blah, blah, blah together. Let's have a big old party. And I would never attend these parties because I don't know why. Very early on, I knew there was a game going on. I think as a music video director, I saw a lot of my peers, and this was at a time where you were being told by the record label, you got to hire a woman according to their literal butts, like badunkadunks they used to call them. Like the bigger, juicier butt, the better. And so there was a lot of these auditions of literally music video directors auditioning for butts, right? And I said to myself, okay, that's a really good way to get, charged with sexual harassment. Like you're literally, and I wouldn't do it. I would bring in an assistant to do it. Now, lo and behold, a lot of those individuals did eventually get sexual harassment charges. They went after him. I was probably one of the only untouched ones because I never flirted with this world. But what I'm trying to say is, even back then, and I'm talking 20 something years ago, there seemed to have been this idea that, oh, now we're working together and you're going to make a bunch of money. Let's get some dirt on you. Seems to be the way that people operate, in that business a lot of the time.
So are they industry insiders that are trying to leverage artists, or do you think that it is the government and the deep state, or is it the mob that are trying to leverage people? I mean, where is it coming from?
I think this is handlers. I think handlers are actually people that are kind of lower level intelligence that are there to deliver information. There's certain kinds of people that ask a lot of questions that are information collectors. These aren't the James Bond types. Let me put it that way. A lot of the time they make it very obvious that due to their amount of curiosity, there is red flags. Let me put it that way. Red flags because you see these information collectors. People should be very scared of information collectors, because it is something that I've seen across decades of these information collectors. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, the person they're collecting information on is charged with sexual harassment or something. And then they lose their credibility. So that's something that I've definitely seen. I don't have concrete evidence that these people are put there by the CIA, but I do see what handlers do, how some of them collect a lot of information. And that is always a red flag,